Hi, so this is the first time I've done video content for Hard Thinking on the Soft Left. I'm Emma Burnell, in case you didn't know what I look like. I'm really sorry. About 2 weeks ago, I wrote about Labour's ads and the problems with them and the reason I thought they were doing them. And I said, as an aside, that I think there's an important conversation to be had about how we deal with public policies issues that are real, but are also often integrated into racist tropes. But I did not think that I was the best person to lead that conversation. And then I thought, hang on, I used to work for the best person who's there to lead that conversation. And that is Sunder Katwala, who you can see on screen with me. Sunder, introduce yourself.
Hi, Emma. Thanks for inviting me. So I'm Sunder Katwala. I run the charity non-partisan think tank British Future, which we launched just over a decade ago now. And I used to work with you at the Fabian Society, where I was General Secretary for 7 or 8 years, up to 2010, 2011.
Brilliant. So, open question to you, Sunder. We're going to talk for about 20 minutes or so. It seems to me there are complications between what are traditionally racist tropes and how we talk about that as we have a more and more diverse looking group of people in charge of us. So, for example, this kicked off over the use of Rishi Sunak on an advert, also talking about child abuse. And it kind of leaned into the grooming gang scandals and things like that. So I really wanted to just capture your initial thoughts when you saw the ad and saw the conversation around that.
I was critical of the ad, and I think there are lots of things that Labour can do. Tie Rishi Sunak, who's been the Prime Minister for 6 months, to the record of 12 or 13 years. Of course, you should try to do that, because if you don't do that, you'll be in trouble. And go hard on the Conservatives on crime. If you want to, if you think they're not convicting people for rape, for murder, for burglary, if the police don't turn up when you phone them up, I mean, an opposition should do that. I didn't think the Labour Party should necessarily be having a kind of who can send the most people to prison debate in general, because, for example, Keir Starmer doesn't think that, nor do most people in the Labour Party. But New Labour was tough on crime and tough on the causes of crime, and it was quite an effective middling position because it said both things. So it gave you permission to do ASBOs and Sure Start. That was good politics. It didn't immediately think, what I thought was nonsense about it was obviously nonsense. It was obviously untrue that Rishi Sunak didn't want to send people who are paedophiles to prison. It'd be absurd to say that of Rishi Sunak. It'd be absurd to say that to Keir Starmer. So it seemed to me a daft thing to say because it wasn't true. Whether there was a racialised element to that wasn't my first instinct. But when I immediately said I wouldn't do it for these reasons, a few other people were saying, but is it also, if Suella Braverman's been saying, watch out, almost all child grooming is done by British Pakistanis, which is inaccurate as a way to discuss it. Are Labour sticking the face of the Asian Prime Minister on, saying, watch out for Rishi Sunak, he doesn't want to send paedophiles? So it was a bad idea that the first ad was paedophiles and whether Rishi Sunak wanted to imprison them, while we were having a very racialised debate about grooming and so on. Once you repeat it and start saying, oh, we're going to have the same ad about who crashed the economy and so on, you kind of mitigate that first point, but you did go in with that first point. So that was another reason it was a question mark. And I remember a long time ago there was an advert with flying pigs in it, and Michael Howard got very upset that maybe this was about his Jewish heritage and ancestry. I'm pretty sure it wasn't in the minds of the people who produced it, that it could be read by that. In that case, it may have been a trope they should have spotted. It may not have been there. In this case, at the end of this week, I don't think any professionals could have thought, oh, we won't be asked about that as well. So that was one more reason to not do it in that way, while doing other hard-hitting adverts about, don't trust the Tories on crime or whatever, So I thought it was a mistake. The racialization wasn't the biggest part of it for me, but it was another way that it sort of had its foot over the line. I didn't see a lot of people defend that advert whose job it wasn't to say it was a good idea. And a lot of people whose job it was stayed very quiet.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I wasn't defending it. I was saying that it made me personally uncomfortable. But I can see why they were trying to bring Rishi Sunak down. I was trying to take a step further back and go, which is what I tend to do in the newsletter, which is instead of here's my opinion on the story of the day. It's here's why I think the story of the day has unfolded in this way. So stepping beyond the advert itself, I think there is an important conversation to be had as the elites of the country do change their appearance, and the people who are in charge of things like justice or immigration, indeed, you've already mentioned Suella Braverman, and before her Priti Patel, do not look like the classic person you can take with, oh, they're just being racist. And how we as progressives who are pushing for more progressive policies deal with that conversation. And that's really, I would be really interested to hear your thoughts on how we should be doing that better.
Yeah, there's a bigger debate here about the Labour Party and how it talks about race, the country, and how it talks about race, the Conservatives, and how we deal with more ethnic diversity at the top of politics. And first point is brilliant news that there's more ethnic diversity at the top of politics. And it's particularly good news, I'm going to say, that it goes across the political parties, and that there might be Black and Asian Conservatives, Black and Asian people on the left of the Labour Party, in the middle of the Labour Party. There might be some Liberal Democrats. There's a Scottish nationalist First Minister and his Labour Unionist opponent who both happen to be British Asian, British Party. So that's good. I think the Labour Party has behaved very well about, Hamza Yusuf being Scottish Asian and Muslim, and Rishi Sunak being British Indian and Hindu, saying, well done, we think this is good for our country. I think the Labour Party has been quite grown up about that. As with gender diversity in politics, the Labour Party does risk being last of all of the parties, despite being the most progressive, to go to leadership. And Labour's very good on gender and on Black and Asian representation, of having more representation overall. And it's a bit slower to take it right to the top. And I think it's worth digging into that. It might just be bad luck. It's certainly just bad luck that Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister and not Barbara Castle. But when it's 3-0, it starts to be a sort of repeated pattern of bad luck that makes you ask if it's something else that's going on. And, Conservatives would say, well, of course we had Disraeli, we had Thatcher, now we've got Sunak, because they talk the talk and they don't do it. So the Conservatives are quite proud of that. Labour struggles, I think, in lots of ways to talk about race, and I think it's going to get harder in the 2020s. I think the diversity of your opponents is a reason you find it tricky, but there are lots of other reasons you find it tricky. The race politics of America and how they relate to the race politics of Britain, and what Black Lives Matter is saying, and how that works for people who are Black and people who are not white but not Black, and people who are white and liberal and want to be on that side. It's quite complicated stuff, but there are some obvious mistakes that people on the soft left might be making. And I would start with, don't make the obvious mistakes. Never say, can't believe you're a Tory. Why are you a Tory? People like you shouldn't be a Tory. I mean, if you want to say that about Suella Braverman, Rishi Sunak, Kwasi Kwarteng, Nadine Dorris, Lee Anderson, if you want to say, I can't believe Black people are Tories, I can't believe Asian people are Tories, I can't believe any woman's a Tory, I can't believe any working class person's a Tory, that's fine, but it shows a lack of observational reality. But to some extent, if you feel it's a bit odd if someone who had a working class background is a Tory, because you feel they should all be Labour, and you may even feel it's odd if any woman is a Tory, but that feels a bit sort of retro. I think it's time to put ethnic minorities, some Black and Asian people are a bit right-wing. Get over it. Lots of them are quite left-wing. You should work with that. Some of them a bit centrist. So that, I think there's lots going on. It's a tactical and strategic error, and it gives your opponent something to beat you with, but it conveys a sense of entitlement, which is the wrong way to think about Labour's strong historic reputation. I.e., Labour has had a lot of support from Black and Asian people in this country, but expecting them to definitely be on your side, whatever happens, and never to be on the other side, well, you're going to be disappointed if you think that, but you're also sending the wrong message in lots of ways.
Very complacent messaging, and also in many ways just saying this group of people are completely homogenous, as a and therefore in some ways less human, less whole than us.
And certainly less politically powerful, because if one side, and this was the truth broadly from 1968 till sort of 1997 and possibly beyond, if one side basically thinks you're in the bag and the other side thinks you're basically out of reach, you're not a very powerful voter. But if Labour's approach is so paternalistic, and I think the Liberal centre can sound a bit like this, as well as the hard left and the soft left. If it's so paternalistic paternalistic, that it's like people tell you you've got an equal opportunity. People will say, you know, you can vote for any of us, we're on your side. Never trust them. You'll never be safe in Britain without the unprotective umbrella of the left and the Labour Party, because we're the only people who will protect you. It'd be very psychologically important then to trade out of that and to trade up. Whereas if the left is saying, by the way, we've got a history of solidarity with people like you and your communities, and there's a history of aspiration, and we can have both those things, that's fine. Because otherwise, and I think this does resemble, you know, the C2s who went from Callaghan to Thatcher. If one side is saying, you know, we're for the people who really need protection, and, you know, we protect the losers and they're for the winners, I mean, it would be very tempting, I think, to join the winners in that respect. So I think it's not just complacent. I think it actively pushes people out.
Absolutely. There's a phrase that I've heard quite often, that the racism of low expectation. I was wondering what your feeling about that phrase and sense is.
Well, so I'm going to say that, you know, having ethnic minority Tories is a good thing, because my view is that I want the ethnic diversity of my country to be normal. It's not the margins. Yeah. Started counting on the census and it was 5% of people. Well, it's 1 in 6 people now. And I want it to be normal at the top of economic institutions, cultural institutions, academic institutions, political institutions. Politics is good at this, and politics across parties is good at this. And, you know, white liberal spaces generally are not very good at this, because it's not as diverse as they want to be, quite anxious about how to do it, and then risk having this, you know, which I think is getting stronger, this anxious guilt about not having the lived experience, therefore never being able to understand the people with the lived experience, therefore wanting the diversity to make sure we've got the authenticity of lived experience. There's lots of good left, soft left, liberal things behind that, but we made a lot of progress on race in my lifetime, and the Labour Party could take some credit for quite a lot of it, because it did tend to pass the Race Relations Act, did tend to introduce minorities into Parliament. The left tends to not want to take credit for the progress we've made, because it wants to highlight the gaps that remain, which is the thing the left should always want to do, because that's right, and people won't want a complacent view, well, we made all the progress, you know, etc. To some extent, the right then gets to tell the story of the progress. If you're not going to do it, why don't they do it? You know, since David Cameron, they've caught up and have adopted it, and they feel the progress that Britain has made and that we see reflected at the top says something good. If they can say that and you can't, then, you know, you've given them something that perhaps could have been your history. But there is something, I think, paternalistic in that approach. And the danger for Labour is, you know, and you could say, you know, there's too meritocratic, too individualistic an approach. You know, Kwasi Kwarteng's life at Eton is not massively as a posh middle-class black African guy at Eton. I mean, you know, there are posh middle-class African people who go into banking and join the Tory party. Yeah, it's not directly representative of people on council estates who are black British and so on. But you shouldn't have a model where the only authentic black people are the people on council estates, because you're going to see, you know, a working class and a middle class and a professional class that is black, Asian, and mixed race. So there's a sense where Labour might have the view that black and Asian people should come into politics to give a voice to unheard communities, and that's their job. Well, that's the reason you won't make them leaders of your party, if their job is to be the tribunes of communities. And it's also a reason which the Labour Party has held on to for 30 or 40 years now, where you think they're going to do better if they represent the more diverse areas, and you're not sure if they can represent the least diverse areas. But you had an Asian MP who was a GP, Ashok Kumar, in Cleveland and Middlesbrough in 1992, and people voted for him and against him on different grounds. So there's a level of, I think, imputed prejudice to the electorate, where you worry about the red wall voters and whether they want black and Asian candidates, that makes you say, you know, people from minorities should bring their community's voice into politics. And some people from minority backgrounds really want to do that. And other people want to do something else. Other people want to do climate change or voter engagement or tax rates or something. And with the strength in numbers, you get to do both. Whereas obviously, like, if the first 3 or 4 black or Asian MPs had come in and said, well, we want to be a bit colourblind, really, it would have been difficult, because there's an expectation. So yeah, I think things have changed a lot now. How the politics then of race and identity play out, and, you know, where the right comes the left on that, I think that is a more difficult challenge for the left.
So we quite often talk about being in a moment, particularly I think since 2020, Black Lives Matter, all of that stuff, there's been this sort of sense of a political moment. I wonder if we are in a moment, or if it just often everything can feel like a moment for different people. And are moments politically useful, or do they crest and fall? And is actually gradual progress a better model?
Well, we're 30 years now from the death of Stephen Lawrence, the murder of Stephen Lawrence, and 25 years next year from the Macpherson inquiry, looking into that. And for me, and it's partly, I'm the same age he was, that was a profoundly important moment for different reasons. I mean, I'm sure lots of people who are Black British said, we knew that case before we knew that case. There was another murder a couple of years earlier and so on. But for Middle England, that was a moment, because, New Labour, which was worried about where it was on the police and what it should do about crime, it backed that and it went for that. And the Daily Mail thought it was important. The Black Left thought it was important. So just for one of those moments, and we saw it again with the Windrush scandal, which was a shared responsibility, but there was a sort of shared agreement that something had gone wrong. So you get these brief moments of consensus. So that for me was like Britain's George Floyd moment in a way. During a pandemic, a racism movement in America is seen as a chance to say things about Britain that haven't been said by young people, Black, white, and Asian. And I think it's catalyzed quite a lot of progress in the conversation. I think for some people that was an anti-racism message in general. For some people, it was a view that Black people in particular don't necessarily benefit from a broad anti-racism about everybody. There are specific challenges. And for other people, it was quite polarizing as well. And one of those things that raises the debate, is polarization can be the cost of progress, because you can't just keep it to yourself. But also having sort of raised, got the point through, how are you following through? Do you have a sustainable agenda there? So there are a lot of people on the fence there about that, because it felt too American. A lot of people on the fence, by the way, because there were protests during COVID and placards saying, and that's what I felt about it personally at first, and we found out later about outdoor transmission not being very important, placards saying racism is the real pandemic. I was thinking, no, that's a useful metaphor, but the real pandemic is the COVID virus, actually. And so, having sort of done maybe excessive degrees of caution about how many times you can leave your house to go for a run, to suddenly say, but it doesn't matter because we're going to protest for our cause, was odd. But there was a real generational split there on the language, the politics, and the left has got all of the voters who were for it in their coalition. And you'll need some of the people who were moderate supporters of it saying, I don't think we're like America either, but it was good to say we've got our own challenges. Let's make progress. So I think the interesting thing is that the political leadership change, Sunak, Hamza Yusuf and so on, is really boring now.
Yes,
it's really normal. No
one
wants to know what the faith of the prime minister is. He's Hindu. We don't even know what that's about. And so that's completely not like a sort of Obama moment. I think that's the strength of it. But when people are like, so let's stop noticing because everyone could always do it. I mean, this has been possible in British politics for about 4 years. Yeah. And, you've got endless numbers of Black and Asian Home Secretaries and Chancellors, some of them absolutely terrible, some of them somewhat competent. But you've got tons of them all the time now. And so it's strength in numbers, but it's been going on for not many years. And, people are still asking, can Sadiq Khan be the mayor of London if he's Muslim? Within this decade. And obviously, if London can't elect a Muslim mayor, then the rest of us will be in trouble. So we've come a long way very quickly on representation right at the top. What I hear people on the left saying is, are these people being used by the Conservatives, which is a form of conspiracy theory, like the conspiracy theory about the woke blob. It's denying them their agency, really. I think we should hold Suella Braverman or Theresa May or Amber Rudd or Sajid Javid, responsible for their choice, not think that they're some puppet of some other group somewhere.
Absolutely. So my last question to you is, where do you think we're going? And to give yourself a little promotion, what is Britain Future's role in this conversation and where we're going next?
British Future, tries to float above the party politics, give useful advice to other people, because we want to get close to the public. And we're for a very mother and apple pie thing, which is more confident, more inclusive Britain that can talk confidently about the issues that people find divisive. But we like to go to the hard issues, racism, extremism, asylum, etc. We like to try and work out how to constructively have the conversations that people find difficult. I think you know, I'm an optimist because I'm in my very late 40s now. And so I saw Britain change a lot for people my age on race, you know, from when I was in the playground or was watching Everton Football Club to when I was at university, you know, and, you know, like Sunak, you know, I left university, there were no, I mean, I voted in an election where there's 6 ethnic minority MPs out of 650. And we didn't have a debate on the BBC about whether there should be more or not, because it wasn't particularly something people had clocked. So I'm an optimist about that, but it's going to get more polarized. And Britain is less polarized, I think, than France or America, substantively, because there's a broad latent consensus there. But the language is going to get more polarized between the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, between the generations, between groups. And so it's going to be harder work, I think, for the soft left and the centre left, the centre right as well, if it wants to try to bridge those divides. But Labour will be the big loser if we have a zero-sum politics of, like, you know, are you with the white working class, or are you with the black British, or with the Asian British? Because if we have that kind of debate, and it happened a bit in Scotland as well, everyone will believe Labour's on the other side, because Labour will attempt to sort of bridge the divide, and everyone will think, they'll think in inner city seats that you only care about the red wall, and up in the red wall they'll say, oh, Labour's for the asylum seekers, the minorities and the migrants. So what Labour needs to do is make progress on reducing the social distance between the people who live in our country. And by the way, that's gone really, really well across the generations. But because it's gone well across the generations, there's a big generational divide. So British Future tries to sort of think, you know, constructively about the difficult issues in ways that show us a way through. I've got a book coming out, which I might as well plug, called How to Be a Patriot. How to Be a Patriot is the name of the book, but it's why the right kind of patriotism. And, you know, I'm mixed race, Indian, Irish, Catholic, kind of Scouser, Essex kind of person. So I'm sort of in the middle of lots of
everyone
in our society. I grew up with some identity issues to sort out. It was going okay for me and for Britain around the turn of the century, but there's no point Sunder Katwala feeling we can get through it if the rest of you are going mad on Brexit and Black Lives Matter and the Great Replacement Theory and Scotland and so on. So I'm trying to navigate those debates, and that I think Labour's issue on things like culture wars, things like identity clashes, don't say nobody cares, we just care about gas bills and so on. Obviously, people care about other things as well in an economic crisis. We all care about identity, and don't just avoid the obvious traps, although Labour Party should avoid the obvious traps. That's a good thing to do. But avoiding the obvious traps just means we just get very scared of debates about identity. All politics is the politics of identity, and there might be identity politics that is narrow and divisive. There might be identity politics that is progressive and expansive. There might be forms of national identity that work, forms of national identity that don't work. All politics is a form is about identity, really, and we need bridging identities from people who want to represent different parts of the country, not choose between them. So I'm plugging away optimistically, constructively at all of that, but I think the anxiety about how to have those conversations is quite high, and that's often because the room knows it's too narrow but doesn't know the people who aren't in the room and is making assumptions about them. I think the assumptions made in most constituency Labour Party meetings about how Black, Asian, mixed race people in Britain think are not quite as accurate as they would be if you talk to more people at the school gate and the sixth forms, not just some of the people who are in the Labour Party group who come in.
Absolutely. I think that's a great note to leave the conversation on. Talk to more people, which is my raison d'etre, why I do all of the communications work that I do. So that's fantastic. Sunder, where can people find you?
So I'm at Sunder Says on Twitter. I'm verified these days. At British Future on Twitter, and to be found there quite often. And you know, my book, How to Be a Patriot, out in May. Do buy it.
Brilliant. I will read it with interest. I've written before about a left-wing view of patriotism, so I'm really, really interested to read that. Thank you very much, Sunder.
Great. Thanks for the invitation, Emma.
Thank you.
Fab.